we've discussed many, many times here on Washington Watch that it's not just big government that threatens Americans' freedom. But given their power over essential services, big banking and big tech, for that matter, they can be a threat as well. And we're all aware of the censorship of big tech platforms, for example, and how they engaged both before and after the 2020 elections. But we've also seen banks implementing policies that target Christian and conservative organizations. Well, joining me now by phone to discuss this is Jerry Bowyer. He's the president of Bowyer Research. Jerry, welcome back to Washington Watch. We appreciate you joining us.
Jody, it's a pleasure to be with you again.
Well, thank you so much. All right, this debanking issue is a critical issue. It seems like we're seeing more and more of this becoming a threat, and we've discussed that here on the program. And I will just say this, notably, J.P. Morgan Chase seems to have backed away from at least some of their discriminatory practices. So let's start there. Do you think this is because the potential PR nightmare that has forced them into backing up some?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two things. One, I think they picked on the wrong guy when they debanked Sam Brownback. I mean, it's one thing to maybe debank people who have fringe views or something like that, or can maybe even be portrayed as having fringe views. But the former, governor of Kansas and senator from Kansas and international ambassador for religious liberty is a very, very mainstream American person, very likable, has a real George Bailey quality to him. So when his bank account was canceled with no good reason given, that was just too much. It was just a terrible mistake. I happen to have been involved with that very deeply. I worked with a financial advisor, David Bonson, to put a proposal on the ballot for J.P. Morgan Chase. We worked very closely with Alliance Defending Freedom on that as well. And David put his proposal forward. It did not get majority support. We maybe need to talk about this because there are people who are fighting this fight with the companies and putting proposals on the ballots, and Christians don't know. So Christians who own stock in J.P. Morgan Chase didn't vote for that, and because they didn't even know that voting is going on. And we had a lot of conversations with J.P. Morgan Chase that really lasted more than a year. I'm not going to say everything's perfect, but they were very productive. And they ended up putting viewpoint discrimination protection in writing on their website. They dropped the social risk category from their WePay payment system. Social risk says that we can cancel your account if we think that you're socially risky. Well, it's completely subjective. I mean, something that's socially risky in Manhattan is not the same thing as something that's socially risky in Pittsburgh, where I'm from. So socially risky is very much in the eye of the beholder. So I'd say two things. One, it was a PR nightmare because Sam Brownback is such a likable person, and clearly debanking him was a terrible mistake. But two, in this particular case, instead of Christians complaining from a distance, which is what I've seen for a long time, we just complain about big tech censorship, we complain about debanking, we talk about those banks, but we don't talk to them. We don't show up for the annual meeting. We don't vote our proxies, and then we're surprised when these banks go bad. I'm a Christian. I believe that every institution to which we do not apply salt is constantly in a state of rot. So we have to apply that salt. So I think them overreaching, plus the media backlash from conservative media, and then engagement, which was not threatening engagement. We just reasoned with them, and they really changed some policies, and we have ongoing constructive conversations. So to me, this is outrage turned into action, not just outrage stuck in outrage stage.
And that's the way it ought to be. I mean, the vast, vast majority of times when we show up, like what you're talking about, we win. And I was not aware of your role in all that with J.P. Morgan Chase. Hats off. Thank you for stepping up in the action you took. We've now seen a number of red states that have passed laws essentially banning this practice of debanking. Have they been effective, in your opinion?
I think they have been effective. It's funny, coincidentally, I happen to be, I won't say which state because it's confidential, but I'm driving home from a meeting with the pension board of a state that's taking on these issues. So what's happening is red state treasurers and pension boards are beginning to say, wait a minute, this is our money, or it's our beneficiaries' money, and these proxy advisory services or these asset managers like BlackRock are voting with our money, and they're voting against our values and against our interest, including on debanking proposals. So, I think red states need to ask about that. And yes, it has been effective. It's been effective in getting some of these companies to back off from the anti-carbon, the anti-fossil fuel agenda, and also on the abortion agenda. I've seen the state of Texas, for instance, and we were involved with this one too. The state of Texas confronted the proxy advisory services, which are the groups that really affect the vote, say, we don't want you pushing abortion anymore. People don't realize this, but activists were putting proposals on ballots of major American companies, pressuring them to divest from pro-life states, which is ridiculous. They're saying it's a business risk to do business in a pro-life state. Those things were getting close to majority support. Texas intervened. We also talked to the proxy advisory services. They changed their policies, and they went from 40% support to the last abortion proposal this year was on the Google annual meeting. It was a proposal to pressure Google to suppress crisis pregnancy centers in its search engine results. Terrible, egregious proposal. But here's the good news. It got 7% support. 93% voted against it. 2 years ago, these things were getting 40% support. So again, we talk about the companies, but we don't talk to them. Christians need to start talking to them, and Christians need to start saying, what do I have in my 401k? Who's voting? How did I vote? Same for institutions and red states. How are we voting? Because you know what? If you're an investor, you're voting. Somebody's voting with your money.
Absolutely.
I can just tell you that you're probably not happy with it, and you need to take back control of that.
Absolutely. Jerry, let me ask you a final question here. This obviously is an industry that you monitor closely, one that you have been and continue to be actively engaged in. Are there other threats here that we should be aware of?
Yes, there are. I just want to put in a good word for this week. The treasurer of Louisiana announced that they're not going to use not going to use Bank of America anymore because of the debanking. And he's right. We engaged with Bank of America. It was not productive. J.P. Morgan, we had productive conversations. Bank of America made a lot of promises, did nothing. Hats off to Treasurer John Fleming, who said, "Okay, you're going to debank, you're going to debank Christian ministries. We're going to unbank you. You fire us as you fire people as customers. We're going to fire you." So, to your question, what's on the horizon? Anti-food. We're moving. The activist community in corporate boardrooms is moving from anti-energy to anti-food. They believe the only way to get to net zero is to cut food production in half, to move us away from meat, and also just to cut food production in general, and depopulation. I know that sounds crazy. It's like a Bond villain, but nevertheless, they're open about it. So there's a war on agriculture and a war on food that is now being gone into in the corporate boardrooms. We need to fight that one. We let them get ahead of us for years on the fossil fuel fight. We cannot let them get ahead of us on the food fight.
Yeah, can you imagine if that fight gets behind us? Jerry Bowyer, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us both concerning news and encouraging news all wrapped up together in one. Great job. Thank you for joining us today.